Chapter 3.
Draco Malfoy found the swirling chaos of his thoughts slightly more manageable with pen and paper, though his paranoia insisted on destroying each page post-use. If only he had his wand, he'd promptly incinerate the evidence. Somehow, his consciousness had catapulted backwards to his 11-year-old self, leaving two unsettling theories in his mind. Could this be time travel or a descent into madness, both potentially violations of his parole? What was happening to his body if this was merely a delusion? Alternatively, if he'd indeed slipped into the past, would he face an interrogation by Aurors over dark magic at the manor on his return? And if brought shamefully before the Wisengamot, lacking Potter's testimony for support, how could he possibly explain his strange escape on his first night of supervised release? At the top of his page, he inscribed time travel and insanity, later adding a third possibility, cursed in false reality, below them. Underneath, he scrawled, problems, parole breach, does time travel equate to international escape? Along with, no wand, Potter's fault. From what he knew about time travel, the past was a fixed entity, a continuous thread folded over to unite a singular timeline. Any alterations brought about by the time traveler had already occurred in their past. However, direct contact with one's past self was strictly off-limits. Did mind possessing them constitute a breach? This scenario defied the norms. He was not the same as he was at 11. He was now an 18-year-old inhabiting an 11-year-old's body, informed now of things he couldn't have fathomed then. Under time travel paradoxes, his brain threatened to combust under the weight of his ignorance. Yet he needed to proceed as if it were time travel. If his reality was the result of enchantment or madness, external forces could potentially resolve it. Proceeding as if in 1990 one meant recognizing that the repercussions of getting it wrong were dire. One aspect of time travel paradoxes was inevitably altering the past. Wasn't that always the threat of time travel? He considered the possibility of an alternate universe. Could this reality differ from the one he remembered? If it didn't, and he was indeed experiencing the past afresh, how could he avoid reshaping it detrimentally? His father's imprisonment, Snape and Vincent's deaths. If he wasn't careful, he could endanger even his mother, his peers, himself, and Potter. If he altered the past excessively, Potter might not grasp victory in their war. Voldemort, yet to rise, might never fall. Draco was overwhelmed. If the past 2 years had demonstrated anything, it was that he wasn't equipped to make significant choices. His feet carried him towards the locked-off cellars. He had initially awoken there, failing to realize that his previous access didn't guarantee future entry. Lacking a wand to attempt unlocking spells, Draco mused that the rightful lord of the manor would typically have access. But he had lost that position, and his wand was absent too. He considered asking his mother to open the doors, but telling her about a magical mirror he'd revisit sounded ludicrous. In this state of uncertainty, he whispered Alohomora, raising his voice impatiently despite how thin and high it sounded. "Let me in," he implored the cellar door. "Let me rectify this before I damage the past irreparably." Unskilled with wandless magic, he resorted to summoning Dobby, calling his house elf. A pop by his side accompanied Dobby's appearance, his eyes nervously on the door. "Dobby," Draco entreated, adopting a tone of maturity, "open the cellar, please." Dobby hesitated. Mistress Narcissa forbids Master Draco the cellars. Clenching his teeth, Draco argued, "I was there before you saw me. Lend me entry again." Stooping to bargain, a self-perceived abomination, Draco resorted to charm.
"All right, Dobby."
"I get it. I need your aid, though." Dobby pondered aloud. Master Draco is kind. Dobby will aid Master Draco. Offering freedom as leverage came to Draco's mind, but with uncertain results and repercussions involved in freeing house elves combined with unforeseen consequences such concepts could bring, he refrained. "Dobby," Draco continued tactfully, "Do you know where a wand might reside within the manor?" He played coy, suggesting, "I need a bit more practice before Hogwarts." When Dobby's doubts reflected in his eyes, Draco's patience was a thin veneer. Finally, Dobby conceded. Dobby knows. He will show Draco the Talon wand. Despite a distaste for namesakes, apparent mystery and practicality were rationale enough to shadow Dobby through the elongated corridors until fatigue tugged at his youthful limbs. Entering a classic yet neglected chamber, Dobby indicated a glass-covered display laden with artifacts, centering Draco's attention on an ornate sword and enchanted trinkets within, but, most importantly, an unmarked, rugged darkwood wand. Hemmed in by enchantments, yet the wand's history eluded Draco. The shape flickered familiarity from preserved portraits or dusty tomes. Named Talon Wand by Dobby, the resemblance to bird talons gave it an arcane allure, but despite any disfavor, Draco only needed it to unlock his return. He grasped the case, instructing, "Open it." Dobby cautioned, "Master Draco, this wand holds." "It doesn't matter," retorted Draco, urgency overriding. "Your magic can do it." Dobby's deferential gaze nearly shattered his calm until his veiled impatience burgeoned. "Fenestra," Draco muttered with an edge of bitterness, snapping his fingers at the glass display. His annoyance solidified in his gesture, only for him to see the glass shatter unexpectedly. He realized a tad too late that he should have been more cautious about potential dark curses on the display. He'd barely escaped a similar predicament recently with another mysterious artifact. Perhaps Dobby had been trying to hint as much, but whether he had or not, Draco found himself indifferent. If some curse caught him and ended his existence right there, it would escape him the headache of returning to the future or grappling with the mundane years that lay ahead in maintaining the distinguished name of Lord Malfoy. The wand rested snugly in his grip, though it required a few adjustments as his fingers remembered how to handle the shorter digits on this peculiar wand. With each wave, dark sparks flickered through the air, casting shiny images across the shattered glass pool beneath his and Dobby's feet. These shimmering bursts of darkness resembled smoke freezing in time. Such potent magic tingled on his arms, curling up his toes until they felt uncomfortably heated in his leather shoes over the worn-out, glass-studded carpets of his ancestors. This wand would more than suffice. He hurled one of his papers into the air above the shards and incanted, "Incendio." He and Dobby jumped back as flames surged skyward from Draco's hand, reaching toward the high, vault-like ceiling. The chandeliers swayed in response to the fiery assault, narrowly avoiding the scorching waves. His magic had not weakened one bit, even in his 11-year-old form. Quite the contrary. It seemed that his magic had traveled with him, though it was irrelevant given his intentions to depart soon. The control, however, seemed to linger at age 11, or this wand simply possessed more power than he was accustomed to. Caution was necessary. His mother's wand had served him for so long since Potter had stolen his. Now, wielding a proper wand that actually responded to him felt like a dangerous luxury. As far as he could tell, there were no curses yet. Perhaps any protective spells on the case, if there were enchantments, as indicated by the lack of dust, didn't affect family members. Or he might soon drop dead, leaving the duty of securing the Malfoy lineage to his parents entirely. His mother wasn't too old for more children yet, was she? It would require the dreaded step of his parents being around each other more than they'd like, but sacrifices had to be endured to preserve the ancient wizarding bloodlines. Perhaps another boy would follow, maybe named Lucius, if such things were destiny's design. "Apologies," Draco spoke, adopting a reassuring smile to pacify the startled elf. "Excellent work, Dobby. Everything's fine."
See?
"Incendio," he invoked again, picturing the area he aimed to ignite in his mind's eye as he tossed the remaining pages, sending them aflame. The fire splayed itself a bit broader than he meant before it died out. "No harm done. There's no need to inform my parents, understand?" His voice turned sharp and commanding, a tone that had grown less second nature over the last year. now becoming something of a facade. After the relentless cruelty imposed on Raoul and countless others, its pleasantness had soured to bitterness on his tongue. But he had learned to play the part well, especially for someone appearing as a mere child. I don't want any misfortune to befall you for merely assisting one of your masters in preparing for Hogwarts. Do you, Dobby? Those wide, blinking marble eyes unsettled him, fearing he was being too subtle. Speak of it and you'll be punished. Keep silent and you'll be rewarded. Clear? Dobby is not saying anything, Dobby replied resolutely and vanished with a pop unique to house elves, a sound Draco had oddly missed during his time in Azkaban. One small creature was far more welcome than the chilling presence of a Dementu. During those dragging weeks alone, feeling the icy cold enveloping him, Draco often pondered his father's fervor for obliterating Muggles when clearly the world would be much improved without Dementus. Reparo, Draco cast, guiding the broken pieces to reassemble the display around the other artifacts. He refrained from touching anything unfamiliar, resisting the allure even of a harmless-looking diary or a sword so serpentine it seemed a sin to leave it untouched. But Draco was no Neville Longbottom. He didn't have a clue how to wield a sword. He quickly grew fond of his new wand. Its use came easy, the main challenge being the strength of the spells unleashed when he forgot to temper his intent, as if the wand had long awaited a Malfoy to wield it, eager to reveal its prowess. A foolish fragment of Draco wished he could bring it back to the future, or find it again where Dobby had guided him. And if, by chance, he encountered Potter, he would brandish this wand as proof he didn't require the return of his old one. Draco was a Malfoy. Malfoys gave charity. They didn't accept it. Especially not from bedraggled, half-blind, half-starved, half-blood Harry Potters, whom Draco would tell most keenly where he could stick that old wand, should he dare offer it. Focus, Draco, scolded the voice of Severus lingering in his mind. How can you let such trivial matters distract you? Are you a Slytherin or a Hufflepuff? The cellars yielded to a hushed Alohomora, and Draco illuminated them with lumos, but his luck ended when searching for what he craved. He scrutinized each door before commencing his search, finding the room he'd awoken in marked by some of his pale strands glittering on the floor, yet there was no sign of the mirror or any indication something of that size had been there. Absurdly, the sight of light filaments against dark made him think of Luna Lovegood, sprawling innocently in their cellars, rousing with her inexplicable serene smile, asking, "Hello, Draco. Do you have any food for me today?" Each trek through room after room cranked his frustration until he had no choice but to inspect the dungeons thoroughly, places that summoned forth more troubling memories than clandestinely feeding Lovegood ever did. Relief washed over him at the distant call of his mother summoning him to dinner. As he ascended, he concluded that the mirror had either vanished or migrated above ground. Spotting Dobby tidying up after the meal, he whispered conspiratorially, asking him to check for any mirror fitting his description in the manor. Dobby professed no knowledge of such a mirror, yet promised to search, only following up with reports confirming its absence. No, there was no mirror like the one he had used on the night the Wisengamot had granted him his pardon. Facing other ordinary mirrors scattered around various rooms, even his own, and shattering them achieved nothing more than providing him with the tedious chore of mending each in turn, occasionally healing cuts from shards that attacked him. Beyond the annoying yellow-haired child he saw daily, he began nurturing an unhealthy loathing of mirrors. On the second morning, he approached his mother's side once Lucius had departed from breakfast, and in hushed tones asked, "Mother, could I confide in you?" "Of course, dear Draco," she replied warmly, with a gentility that seemed almost unfamiliar. His father hadn't changed as drastically, coldness didn't register with him as it did with his mother. "I need to tell you something." Draco started, hesitated, and then swallowed hard. She wouldn't understand, or at least wouldn't initially believe he wasn't crafting tales for amusement, until future events unfolded, if they ever mirrored his experiences, and then potentially at best thinking him a rather odd seer. Never mind, He retracted swiftly, retreating to his room. He stifled the urge to set his room's dragon, with its mock fireworks, on fire when they infuriatingly twinkled at him on his entrance. Options for revealing, Draco scribbled atop a parchment destined for burning. Father, mother. Together or separate. And then, as ominous as the encroaching idea was, the deceased, Severus Dumbledore. They had the disadvantage of requiring him to reach Hogwarts to confide in them, along with the advantage of not being his immediate family. Draco could pen a letter if he was truly inclined, especially to his own godfather, but convincing anyone in writing would be insurmountably difficult compared to in person, so realistically he waited. Fellow Slytherins Vince, Greg, Blaise, Theo, Pansy, Millie, along with the specter of the one undead name, they were all merely 11. One more option remained at the bottom, no one. Had he truly been an 11-year-old, Draco would have run straight to Lucius, spilling his troubles without delay, expecting he would write everything. Yet that was the catch. Lucius couldn't rectify everything. More often than not, he complicated things even more. Narcissa would simply defer to Lucius. She wouldn't stand against his will, no matter the situation. Draco settled on Severus. Perhaps it was partly selfish, to see his godfather alive once more, and partly an attempt to delay facing Dumbledore. Severus would understand, would guide him without letting him ruin everything. Maybe it would take time to piece things together. Draco wasn't idealistic enough to think anyone could wave a wand and fix it. But Severus would secure the past, and sooner or later, he'd succeed and return Draco to his rightful time. Maybe Draco wouldn't have to divulge the entire future. Maybe Severus wouldn't want to know, or Draco could deflect or obscure the truth. Severus was unmatched in legilimency and among the finest declamans of his generation. But Draco had honed his acclimacy with the Death Eaters, mostly under his Aunt Bella. Perhaps his skills, though modest beside Severus's, might withstand scrutiny under the guise of youth. Even if Severus gleaned a glimpse, if Draco sought assistance, someone might need to understand what he had done. What Severus had carried out, whether by Dumbledore's command or another's. He'd rather confide in Severus alone, because sharing it with anyone else, particularly Lucius, would only unleash havoc. He wouldn't aid in Draco's return without first exploiting every scrap of information, using it to tarnish the future just as well. Draco Malfoy couldn't bring himself to confront Dumbledore, so instead, he sought out Severus Snape as a guidepost in his quest. He wandered the manor daily, searching relentlessly for a mirror he was beginning to believe might be non-existent. Until he and Severus could have a private conversation, Draco resolved to keep a low profile, ensuring he did nothing to attract attention or risk altering history. This necessitated steering clear of Harry Potter completely.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated with more audiobooks. Happy listening!